Before you move on with your day, there's something you need to consider. Something most people completely overlook when they're trying to understand a connection that still feels unfinished. What if the silence you've been reading as distance is actually not silence at all, but processing? What if the thoughts you assume are gone are actually still present, just not expressed? Because the truth is, people rarely forget what genuinely moved them. They don't always say it, they don't always show it, but it doesn't simply disappear either. And if you've been waiting for clarity from someone who seems emotionally unclear, the real question might not be whether they feel anything, but whether you've been paying attention to how those feelings reveal themselves in ways that are not direct, but consistent. This is where things start to become a lot more revealing than they appear on the surface. What if, in a private conversation you were never part of, your name suddenly came up and something subtle changed? Their tone shifted, their expression softened or tightened. The energy in the room moved in a way no one could fully explain. Most people assume the truth of a connection is only revealed in direct conversations. But the deeper reality is that some emotions only surface when you are not there to defend, explain, or interrupt them. People often reveal what they truly feel to those they trust, not necessarily to the person they feel it about. And somewhere along the way, your presence entered their inner world enough that your name no longer feels unfamiliar in their thoughts. It shows up naturally, not because it is forced, but because it lingers. What they said in those moments may reveal more than they ever intended. People can hide emotions from others, and sometimes even from themselves. But when something is truly felt, it has a way of escaping through ordinary conversation without permission. And that is what we are exploring here. The possibility that your presence is still being registered, still being processed, still being spoken about in ways you are not aware of. This goes far beyond appearance or words. It is about the kind of energy you carry. Energy is the impression you leave behind without trying, the emotional atmosphere that stays with someone after you are gone. Many people overlook this because they focus only on what is visible. But human beings are constantly reacting to what they feel beneath the surface. And the person you care about may have noticed changes in you that even you have not fully registered yet. Growth is rarely sudden. It happens quietly, through experiences, challenges, and internal shifts. Because of that, you may not see your own evolution clearly, but others sometimes notice it more easily from a distance. When they spoke about you, they were not just recalling a single moment. They were reacting to an accumulation of impressions: how you handle pressure, how you keep moving forward despite uncertainty, how you maintain kindness in situations where others might harden. These subtle traits often leave a stronger mark than anything dramatic ever could. People are drawn to authenticity. They remember those who feel real, who continue becoming more themselves over time. And your presence may have stood out precisely because it carries a quality they do not encounter often in everyday life. Some people pass through others' lives without leaving a trace. Others leave something that stays, an emotional memory that returns whenever similar feelings or conversations arise. So when your name came up, it likely wasn't random. It was connected to something meaningful that still exists in their internal world. Energy does not need proximity to be felt. Even in silence or distance, people can still sense what someone represented in their life. Your growth, your confidence, your self-respect, all of it sends signals that are felt even when not spoken. And often, they may not have the words to explain what they feel, only the awareness that something about you remains impactful. Admiration plays a quiet role in this. It builds slowly through observation, not sudden emotion. It forms when someone repeatedly notices consistency, strength, resilience, or emotional depth in another person. Over time, that observation turns into reflection, and reflection often turns into conversation. Even when there is no reason to bring someone up, their name still enters the discussion because the mind naturally returns to what it respects or values. But admiration also creates vulnerability. To admit how much someone affects you requires emotional exposure, and not everyone is ready for that. So instead, only fragments of what they feel are spoken out loud, often indirectly, often carefully. What remains unspoken is usually far greater than what is shared. And that is where the real story exists, in the gap between what is said and what is felt. Because while they may not tell you directly, your presence may still be echoing through their conversations, shaping their thoughts in quiet, unseen ways, long after the moment has passed. They may appear indifferent on the surface, while privately thinking about that person far more often than they would ever admit. The person you love could be living inside this exact contradiction, where their public behavior is composed and controlled, but their private thoughts are far more emotionally active and unresolved. Hidden admiration often reveals itself in memory. People do not retain every detail of casual interactions, yet when genuine admiration is present, even the smallest things are preserved. A phrase, a reaction, a habit, a moment that others would overlook, suddenly becomes something they can recall with surprising clarity. These details are not random. They are evidence of sustained attention, and attention is never neutral. It naturally moves toward what holds meaning. The person you love may have shared specific observations about you with someone else, showing a level of awareness that goes beyond surface-level interest. Noticing how you think, how you respond, how you carry yourself in difficult moments, these are not casual observations. They reflect emotional investment, even if it is not openly acknowledged. There is also a clear difference between simply liking someone and genuinely respecting them. Admiration is a combination of emotional pull and deep appreciation for character. It is not only about attraction, but about recognizing values, resilience, authenticity, and emotional strength in another person. And that is often what lingers the most. The person speaking about you may have pointed out qualities they find inspiring: your ability to stay grounded under pressure, your consistency, your honesty, or the way you remain true to yourself, even when circumstances become difficult. These traits create a deeper psychological imprint than temporary attraction ever could. What makes hidden admiration so powerful is that it continues to influence thought even when it is never expressed directly. A person may not fully understand what they feel, or they may struggle to put it into words. So instead, it comes out indirectly, in conversations, in passing remarks, in moments where your name appears without planning. And often, what is said is only a fraction of what is actually felt. Because beneath carefully chosen words, there is usually a much larger emotional reality, one filled with respect, curiosity, appreciation, and feelings that remain partially unspoken. The idea that your absence has meaning is rooted in a simple psychological truth. People often recognize value more clearly when it is no longer immediately present. When someone becomes part of another person's emotional routine, their absence does not feel empty. It feels noticeable. The person you love may have experienced this shift without fully understanding it. What once felt normal now stands out in memory. Conversations, presence, emotional familiarity, all of it becomes more vivid once it is no longer consistently there. Many people assume that if they are not being actively contacted or mentioned, they are no longer being thought about. But the mind does not work in such a linear way. In reality, absence often intensifies reflection. When a person becomes emotionally significant, they begin to occupy space in thought patterns. They become part of internal routines. And when that presence is reduced or removed, the mind notices the change. The result is reflection, sometimes subtle, sometimes persistent. The person you love may find themselves revisiting old conversations, remembering small moments that once felt ordinary, or experiencing thoughts that appear without warning. These memories gain emotional weight precisely because they are no longer being replaced by new experiences. This often happens quietly, beneath awareness. They may not immediately understand why certain thoughts keep returning. They may simply notice that your name surfaces more often than expected, or that certain situations remind them of you without clear reason. Absence creates contrast, and contrast creates awareness. And awareness often leads to emotional clarity. During conversations with others, they may unintentionally reveal this internal shift. They might mention memories that keep resurfacing, or describe moments they cannot stop thinking about. Even without intending to disclose anything meaningful, their words can expose what they are still processing internally, because people do not repeatedly think or speak about what carries no emotional imprint. The mind naturally returns to what matters. Absence also opens space for imagination. When someone is no longer immediately present, curiosity fills the gap. Thoughts begin to form questions: how they are doing, what they are feeling, whether they have changed, whether they are thinking in the same direction. These questions are not random. They are signs of emotional engagement that has not fully faded. And even when people try to suppress these thoughts, they often reappear in subtle ways, through memories, associations, or unexpected reminders in daily life. What seems like a simple absence is often a deeper emotional signal, that the connection still exists internally, even if it is no longer visible externally. And when your absence is felt, it usually means your presence once carried meaning that cannot be easily replaced. That is where emotional impact truly reveals itself, not in constant expression, but in the way someone continues to be present in another person's thoughts long after the interaction has ended. People naturally give more mental and emotional space to those who have genuinely impacted their lives. They think about them more often, mention them more in conversation, and respond more strongly when anything related to them comes up. From the outside, these patterns are easier to notice because observers are not caught inside the emotional experience. They see actions, repetition, and behavior, without the internal justifications that often cloud personal understanding. While the person you love may try to explain away their reactions or keep their feelings contained, others tend to focus on what is consistently visible. There is also a psychological pattern where people around someone sometimes recognize emotional attachment before the person themselves fully understands it. Feelings rarely appear all at once. They develop slowly, layer by layer. A person may believe they are simply curious, thoughtful, or mildly affected, while those observing them begin to sense something deeper forming beneath the surface. That is why a simple comment from a trusted friend can sometimes feel unexpectedly revealing. It lands differently because it reflects something the person has not fully admitted to themselves yet. The person your loved one spoke with may have noticed how much emotional weight your name carries in conversation. They may have picked up on a level of attention and admiration that goes beyond casual reference. Not because of a single moment, but because of repetition, how often you are mentioned, how naturally your name appears, and how the tone subtly shifts when you are the subject. Over time, these small signals form a pattern that is difficult to ignore. And outside observers often have a clearer view of these patterns because they are not emotionally invested in protecting or denying what they see. Their perspective is simpler. They are only noticing what consistently stands out. If they sense something meaningful, it is usually because the behavior has already revealed it. Even when words are carefully controlled, emotional significance has a way of showing itself through consistency, attention, and the way one person continues to occupy space in another person's thoughts and conversations. This leads into something deeper. The idea that an inner transformation may already be unfolding. Transformation rarely announces itself. It does not arrive in a single moment of clarity. More often, it develops quietly through reflection, emotional friction, and gradual shifts in perception. A person may feel confused, introspective, or emotionally unsettled without realizing that these are signs of internal change already in progress. The person you love may currently be going through this without fully understanding it. On the surface, it might look like hesitation or overthinking. Internally, it may be something more significant, a slow reorganization of how they perceive themselves, others, and the relationships that matter to them. Human beings change most deeply through connection. Certain relationships do not just pass through our lives, they reshape how we think, feel, and interpret experience. They challenge assumptions, expose emotional blind spots, and bring awareness to parts of ourselves that were previously unexplored. And once that process begins, it does not simply disappear. The person you love may have encountered emotions, thoughts, or reflections through their connection with you that they had never fully confronted before. That kind of experience often triggers a gradual internal shift, one that feels both enlightening and unsettling at the same time. Transformation often begins with questioning. What once felt certain starts to feel less stable. What once felt enough may no longer feel complete. Emotional priorities begin to shift, sometimes subtly, sometimes noticeably. If they have spoken about you to someone else, those conversations may unintentionally expose this shift. Not through direct admission, but through the way they reflect, hesitate, or return repeatedly to the same thoughts. Because when something begins to matter more deeply, the mind does not stay silent about it. One of the hardest parts of transformation is that it forces a person to face emotional defenses they have relied on for a long time. These defenses are usually built to protect them from vulnerability, disappointment, or emotional risk. But meaningful connections often weaken those barriers without permission. The person you love may be discovering that what once felt emotionally manageable now feels harder to ignore. This creates inner contradiction. One part of them may be moving toward emotional openness, while another part resists change because it feels unfamiliar or unsafe. That tension is often what creates confusion, distance, or inconsistency in behavior. But beneath that surface conflict, awareness is expanding. They begin noticing patterns they previously overlooked. Certain thoughts return more often. Certain memories carry more weight. Certain names do not leave their mind as easily as before. And over time, perception itself begins to shift. What once felt ordinary may start to feel meaningful. What was once dismissed may now feel significant. The same connection is no longer interpreted the same way it used to be. This is how transformation reveals itself, not loudly, not instantly, but gradually, through changing thought patterns and evolving emotional awareness that eventually reshape how a person understands both themselves and the connection they are part of. When someone is going through a real inner transformation, they slowly become more aware of what truly matters to them, what they are feeling, and what they can no longer push aside within themselves. The idea that unspoken emotions eventually look for expression reflects a basic truth about human psychology. Feelings are not meant to stay buried forever. Even when people try to suppress them, avoid them, or deny them for a time, emotions still exist beneath the surface. They continue shaping thoughts, reactions, and decisions in ways that are often subtle but consistent. The person you love may be experiencing emotions that have grown beyond what they initially expected. What may have started as simple curiosity, admiration, or mild emotional interest can slowly deepen into something more complex, creating an inner tension that becomes harder to ignore over time. People often believe that staying silent about their emotions gives them control over them. But silence does not remove feelings. It only pushes them beneath conscious awareness. And even there, they continue to work in the background. This is why someone may find themselves thinking about a specific person repeatedly, even when they try to focus elsewhere. Certain memories return without effort. Certain thoughts resurface without invitation. That repetition is often a sign that the emotional experience carries real significance. Unspoken emotions tend to reveal themselves indirectly. A person might bring someone up more often in conversation, ask questions about them, revisit shared memories, or show unexpected interest in their life. These are not random behaviors. They are ways the mind tries to process what has not yet been fully understood. The person you love may have spoken about you to someone else for exactly this reason. Sometimes, it is easier to talk around a feeling than to confront it directly. There is also an important difference between temporary emotions and deeper emotional attachment. Temporary feelings tend to fade when circumstances change. Deeper emotions do not. They remain present, continuing to influence thoughts and inner responses, even in silence or distance. The person you love may now be in that deeper stage, where the feeling can no longer be dismissed as something passing or insignificant. Fear is often the reason emotions remain unspoken. Fear of rejection, fear of misunderstanding, fear of vulnerability, or fear of change can all make a person hold back what they truly feel. The more meaningful the emotion becomes, the harder it is to express it openly, because expression requires emotional exposure. This creates an internal conflict between wanting honesty and wanting protection, between emotional pull and emotional safety. That tension often leads to hesitation, overthinking, and deep reflection. As emotions grow, they first seek recognition within the self before they ever reach communication with others. Speaking about someone in conversation can become part of that recognition process. It allows a person to test their thoughts, observe their reactions, and slowly make sense of what they are feeling. So when your name appears in their conversations, it may not be accidental. It may reflect an internal process still unfolding. Emotions that carry real meaning rarely stay completely hidden. They tend to surface through words, behaviors, attention, and repeated thoughts. Even when nothing is said directly, the presence of those feelings can still be detected in small, consistent patterns. And the fact that you remain part of those patterns suggests something important. The emotional impact has not faded. It is still being processed internally. As this reflection comes to a close, it is worth remembering that some truths are not revealed through direct confession, but through indirect expression, through conversations held in your absence, through memories that keep returning, and through the lasting imprint someone leaves on another person's inner world. The person you love may still be discovering what they truly feel. But what is becoming clear is that your presence has had an effect that did not simply disappear with distance or silence. Something about you has remained present in their thoughts. At the same time, life has its own timing. What is meant to be understood eventually becomes clear. What is meant to be expressed eventually finds a way out into the open. Until then, the most important focus remains your own growth and direction. Not from a place of waiting, but from a place of becoming. Because meaningful connections are never built through urgency or pressure. They unfold through clarity, self-awareness, and emotional maturity. Whatever comes next, it should align with peace, self-respect, and genuine emotional understanding. In the end, what this all comes down to is something simple, even if it feels deeply complex while you are living through it. Not every emotion is spoken out loud, but that does not make it less real. Not every feeling is openly acknowledged, but that does not mean it disappears. What people feel often continues quietly in the background of their thoughts, shaping how they see others, how they react, and what they remember long after a moment has passed. If someone has truly impacted your life, that impact does not vanish just because time or distance separates you. It shows up in memory, in reflection, in conversations, and in those quiet moments when their name returns without effort. The person you love may still be in that space of reflection, where feelings are not fully defined, but they are no longer easy to ignore, where thoughts return more often than expected, where silence is not emptiness, but processing. But what matters most is not guessing every hidden thought or searching for certainty in every sign. What matters is understanding that real connection, if it is meaningful, has its own way of revealing itself in time. Not through pressure, not through confusion, but through clarity that grows naturally when the mind and heart are ready. And if something is truly meant for you, it will not require chasing or forcing. It will unfold with honesty, timing, and mutual awareness. If it is not, then no amount of overthinking will turn uncertainty into peace. So the real conclusion is this. Let life reveal what it needs to reveal. Let people come to their own clarity. And in the meantime, do not lose yourself in trying to decode every silence or every absence of words. Because the strongest position you can stand in is not waiting for signs from someone else, but building a life where your own growth, stability, and self-worth are already certain. Whatever is real will become clear. Whatever is meant to stay will stay. And whatever is only confusion will eventually lose its hold on you. And from that place, you move forward. Not in uncertainty, but in understanding, patience, and self-respect.